Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our webinar summer series, the BioTools Innovator webinar summer series. Today, we're going to have a really interesting webinar about product development and manufacturing. So as everybody knows, our webinar series is live streamed on our YouTube channel and on our LinkedIn channel. So follow us, join us, even if you're not part of our BioTools Innovator cohort. These webinars are open to the public, so you can all learn and join us. For those of you joining that are not part of BioTools Innovator and are not familiar with BioTools Innovator, just a quick intro. So BioTools Innovator is a nonprofit accelerator and competition that is the first ever to focus on life science tools and molecular diagnostics developers. And so with that mission in mind, this is our third cycle of fostering really cutting-edge, innovative life science tools that are in service of the biotech and pharma industry. And so today with us, we're going to talk about product development and manufacturing, really important topic in the pathway to commercialization. And today, the webinar will be hosted by our very own Ari Marcelino, our program manager. Hi, Ari.
Good morning.
All right, so I will let Ari go ahead and introduce our panelists and start the discussion. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ayelet. So before we dive deep into a wide range conversation exploring many areas of product development and manufacturing, like to introduce the three panelists, and they're going to go into a little intro of themselves and background and how they engage with biotech startups. So first up, we have Ryan McGinnis, General Manager Commercial at Triple Ring Technologies. Ryan, if you'd like to go ahead and provide a brief background.
Okay, thanks, Ari, and thanks, Ayelet, for setting this up and including me today. I'm Ryan McGinnis, Commercial GM at Triple Ring Technologies. Triple Ring Technologies is a co-development company. We stand side by side with innovators and entrepreneurs to solve hard problems, launch breakthrough products, and build companies. My background is molecular cell biology. I've been in the business for 37 years, starting out in cell and gene therapy, biotherapeutics, cellular therapeutics, and then on into hardware for pharmaceutical drug discovery, and then IVDs, this type of stuff. And at Triple Ring, we are a big group of doers. We build complex systems. And so I have teams that work in the med device, but also life sciences or in vitro diagnostics space. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley, also have a nice office downtown Boston. And the way we engage with early stage companies is extensively. We get very, very deeply involved, and we can talk about that in more detail later, but we look for ways of sharing risk and putting skin into the game. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Ryan. Next up, we have Joe Lemakin, Head of Strategy, Precision Medicine at Draper.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Joe Lemakin, Head of Strategy and for Precision Medicine at Draper. My technical background is in engineering and biology, and bulk of my career I spent at startups building medical devices, consumer products, and more recently cell therapy reagents and instrumentations. Draper is a nonprofit innovation and engineering partner, mostly focused on the U.S. government, but also works extensively with industry, leveraging the technology that's been developed with the government into commercial applications. We work extensively with startups to develop new tools and new manufacturing equipment based on our strong capabilities in hardware, software, as well as biology. So we have a BSL-2 and BSL-3 labs employing immunologists, virologists, cell biologists that really are coupled with the engineering services that we provide to help startups get their products off the ground. We partner with companies large and small. We've built our own electroporation modules, acoustic cell separation devices that we've partnered with companies like Kite, but also do a lot of work with small stage companies, helping them develop their products. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And to round out the panel, we have Dan Catron, Head of Corporate Strategy at the Cell Therapy Manufacturing Center, CTMC.
Thanks, Ari. Yeah, hi. It's just great to be on this panel. I may be a little bit of a fish out of water compared to the other two panelists, but I will bring, I'll attempt to bring a little bit of a different background, possibly, which is scientific background, which is very similar, immunology and cancer. I've done a lot of work with startups as a co-founder and consultant, helping other folks do that, specifically faculty out of academic centers. But I have also clinical research experience at Stanford and IQVIA, as well as going into running a tech transfer office, learned the ropes at University of Miami, and then ran my own office at Scripps Research Institute after that, and have been in stem cell and cell-based therapeutics for about the last 5 years. And generally that, all of that taken together between, contracts and intellectual property, the science and the business, it's kind of generally been my experience of working, but, at the intersection of all three of those, business, law, and science. So that's what I think most of the panelists as well will try to do that, but we all have pretty interesting backgrounds. This should prove to be a great conversation. So looking forward.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your unique perspective. So let's jump in as we continue to move into like the product development and manufacturing theme. I want to talk about partnership models to begin, and so let's start with Ryan. What are some of the different types of product development partnerships, and can you discuss how a company, a startup, can go about evaluating what the best structure is for their model and technology?
Okay, yeah, so maybe I'll start with the easy one first, and then we can get into more creative things that we've done over time. But at Triple Ring and at groups like ours, it's contract R&D, contract innovation. And so that means we have a set scope of work and a schedule that we march to, and a budget, and we build systems, or we de-risk concepts, or get parts into the clinic. And so that those business structures are fairly typical. Triple Ring likes to do everything fixed bid these days, or find ways of sharing risk such that we're on time and on budget, and have quality deliverables. But over time, we have done quite a bit more than just that vanilla sort of contracting work. We have companies that reside with us inside of our incubator, which is known as Agility Labs. And we end up being the R&D team for these somewhat virtual companies. And so we have relationships with companies that are selling product. It's in surgery suites, it's on market, and they dial up and down Triple Ring as revenues come and go, just like an R&D team inside of your own company. And we've done that type of thing for years. And then we also have these risk-sharing models where we like to invest in companies that we work with, and we like to work with companies we can invest in. So we will do equity swaps to build alignment across our groups, but also to help stretch runways. Cash is king for early stage companies. So, does that help, Ari? Is that kind of what you're after?
Yeah, that's definitely along the lines. And Joe, can you share more about, in your perspective, different product development partnership models, and also how Draper, maybe elaborate more about how Draper engages with those startups as well?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is a bit in and out, so hopefully you can hear me. I'll try to speak
right now
slowly. Yes, we in many ways act as an extension of the company's own R&D arm, as well as prototyping capabilities, where we provide those services. So on a statement of work or contractual basis, we'll work together to add engineering capabilities, add research capabilities to the startup that's undertaking a product development cycle. So as part of that, what's relatively unique about us is that we have over 2,000 engineers internally, so we can apply a really profound skill set to the folks' problems. We have experts in biology, engineering of various sorts, software that we can readily apply to the customer's programs. And we also have facilities that allow us to handle complex biological samples as well as prototype quickly in a variety of different ways. Thirdly, one of the things we bring to the table is a very deep internal IP portfolio that allows us to bring specific tools and technologies that have already been de-risked in many ways to help the customer with the specific technical challenge that they're working on. And it's part of our business model to democratize the access to those technologies. So we will readily license the IP that's used to help the customer move forward for their field of use.
Nice. And Dan, can you share more about CTMC, different partnership models, and also in terms of, evaluating a lot of the options, beyond the CDMOs or resilience or the joint venture that you're part of?
Yeah, absolutely. So there'll be some similarities in Ryan's model. Ryan, I was shaking my head yes, because it's a really powerful thing that you have in risk sharing, and that's definitely what CTMC, again, Cell Therapy Manufacturing Center, does. I should back up just a bit. CTMC is a joint venture between MD Anderson and Resilience, National Resilience. As we were originally part of MD Anderson and wanted to do maybe more creative deals, and sometimes working within a large academic center can be a little challenging to do that with just the layers of oversight and governance and that. So it was decided that we would spin out. We took over a very large facility just a couple of blocks away from MD Anderson, still in Houston there. And it was it was just a beautiful facility. We've since expanded and added ballrooms and other things like that, so we can take capability as we get cell therapeutic ready to launch. But we really have essentially two sides to, I guess, the conversation here. So the first side is we act a little bit like a CDMO, but we do risk sharing, as I mentioned before. And what that means is that a company comes to us as a therapeutic product, and then they want to have a regulatory strategy developed. They want to go through the process and analytical development, get something that's manufacturable, go into the manufacturing suite, get the IND filed in a timely manner, get access to patients, which MD Anderson provides in spades. The #1 hospital for clinical trials in the cell-based therapeutics space, and so we can provide access to MD Anderson, to all of the folks from the regulatory, manufacturing, quality, the entire gamut. And we charge one all-in price. It can be spread over 10 to 12 months. It can be back-ended. We can do all sorts of different things. We have a lot of flexibility in those deals. And the other side of what we do is working sometimes, we can identify bottlenecks, as some of the attendees may Carvykti and Johnson & Johnson sort of struggle in providing a lot of the therapy that's been approved. It's just a challenge to manufacture. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. It's not something that we've worked on. It's just something that's kind of generally or relatively or readily understood in the field as being sort of a really great win, but also coming with a significant challenge. And with the other part of the joint venture that we have, which is National Resilience, that was founded essentially to address those bottlenecks in manufacturing. And one of the things that we like to do is to partner with companies that are developing tools. That's not something that we do, but we know how to use them, and we know where all the bottlenecks and all the pain points are. And so if we can find a company that has addressed one of those for us, so we want to see, let's put it through its paces. Let's find a project. Let's see how that works, and really figure out how we can do that. There's a lot of ways that we can do that outside of the risk sharing model, although there is some of that involved typically, but it could be, we'll get into this, I think, a little bit further on, but providing access to a project, generating some of the data, and working through, marketing of that data and making sure that we have some, let's say, co-promotion or co-marketing of that, and really, what the benefit overall to the market is, and how, that's been used internally at CTMC can generally represent a really big win. So more on those elements later.
Yeah, thanks, Stan. And unless anybody else has anything to add about different models, how you partner, I can continue to move forward.
Yeah, maybe Ari, just the one thing is that the word partner is critical to all this. And maybe we'll get into it a bit deeper, but what innovators are trying to do is by definition difficult and hasn't been done before. And so all the planning up front and all the guessing is only as good as the first set of experiments that you do in the lab together. So you need partners that have the experience, patience, are calibrated to just how challenging it can be to do new things. And so it ends up, you kind of want to set things up almost as if, it's in your entire product company, where you have a executive function that is driving the strategy for the company. You have a marketing function that is listening to the customer, and you have an R&D function that is implementing those strategic plans and market plans. And that loop and that communication has to be incredibly tight. And it has to be flexible and trusted, and because things change. So you want a good group, good partner that you can weather the ups and downs of innovation with.
Nice. And sticking with you, Ryan, this is a good segue to talk about, how to identify the right development partner. What are some of the things that founders, companies have to think about, or things that differentiate the different types of partners besides cost, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a critical thing. I mean, cost is certainly one consideration, but I would say it gets too much attention, and it's sort of the wrong focus point. What you really are after is value. And so how do you select a good partner? At the top level, you need folks who have done it before and have the infrastructure to do what you need to do. And just like Joe was saying, you need groups of people who have the backgrounds in the science, but also in the product development, but have labs, have all the tools that you need, or most of them. And so that's a relatively straightforward process of identifying who's capable of doing the work that you're after. And then the softer part of it does get a bit more challenging. Again, you need to have good partners, trusted partners. And that starts with going into your network. I know all these people that are in the audience are very well networked and have good friends. All of us overlap by half of a degree. Talk to your friends, talk to folks that know us, and understand, because we've worked with, and all these groups have worked with so many folks. You'll get a good sense of who would be able to solve this specific problem you've got, and then build that relationship and be communicative and open. I think is the best way to do.
Yeah. Nice. And Joe, do you have anything to add? Because Draper has a very interesting models and different options. And so do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Ryan's point's well made, that I think you need the skill sets and the facilities in order to be effective. I think the other point that I would add is that it's important to find a partner with the responsiveness and the culture that matches yours, right? Ultimately, we ourselves see ourselves as an enabler of core components within the business and the products that, a startup or a company is trying to move forward. And I think to do that within an environment which is, high risk, highly dynamic, you want to work with people who are not only competent, but also kind of can breathe the same air as you. And I think one of the things that's unique about Draper is that we have a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit that's here, in part because we work on all phases of the product development cycle, from super early conceptual feasibility. Many times that work is done in partnerships with grants as well, to kind of hardcore product development, where you're sort of quickly trying to build prototypes that are fit for purpose, all the way to trying to build systems that can go into the clinic. So I think our ability to span that range and ultimately vary the skill set and the culture of the group that's working on the project to accommodate this, to accommodate the work, we think is really important to successful partnerships, because we know that innovation is hard and it's never a straight line. And you know, being able to work with people who can breathe the same air and pivot with you and understand what you're going through is really important.
Nice. And can you share more about collaborating with the SVRAS? I think it's really interesting to share with audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I would say within the kind of our bio efforts, I would say, let's say maybe 50% of our work is grant-based. So we have very well-established machinery for applying for government funding opportunities with, you know, BARDA, DARPA, NIH, a whole host of agencies, some of which will sort of look for solicitation, will look for opportunities with Draper explicitly. And we're happy to partner those with third-party companies. So we're very well equipped to serve as a prime or as a sub. And in many cases, an early stage life science company doesn't necessarily want to build up the infrastructure even to rent the grant themselves. So that's been a big opportunity for us, where we're able to help early stage companies go after those funds, because we have the track record and the infrastructure to be able to administer and support those opportunities. So whether those are STTRs or sort of, you know, like, for example, new ARPA-H solicitations, those are things we do a lot of ourselves, as well as in partnerships with early stage life science companies.
Great. And evaluating the right partner goes hand in hand with, you know, identifying the right partner. And so one of the questions from our cohort was about, you know, determining if that right partner or CDMO has the right capabilities and project management skills, for example. So how do you go about, you know, evaluating that beyond just speaking with a few different references?
Yeah. I'll sort of give, I guess, an answer from my vantage point here, Draper. I think a lot of it is about building trust together, and I think a lot of the work that we do starts with sort of many conversations that spend many months, and then maybe a little trial project where you sort of kind of feel each other out in terms of how you work and how you think. And I think there's really no substitute for that, right? It's sort of just try something, get in the trenches, and use that as a way of evaluating how well you're going to work together. Sometimes even responsiveness to an email or a contract revision can be a good insight. So that'd be sort of my advice in terms of how to look for folks that you want to work with.
Yeah, and for us, getting people into our building and getting to meet our team. So ours is a good sized team, about 120 of us, and coming into the facilities, seeing the type of work we do, the kinds of labs that we have and the tools that are available, gives a very good sense of the culture and of the people that you'd be partnering with. So.
Nice. And Dan, on the flip side, like, how do you go about, you know, evaluating companies that you want to collaborate or partner with?
Yeah, so a lot of that really comes from the science, and also in equal parts the problem being solved. So at CTMC, we're reliant upon access to manufacturing analytical tools that are available. And if a company comes and says, "Hey, you know, we've got this new, let's say, manufacturing method encapsulated in a device that allows, let's say, recreation of the tumor microenvironment." Now we're really listening, because that's an issue with, for example, manufacturing of tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, TILs, can be a really tricky, very long process. And anything that we can do to make that process shorter or more repeatable, then we're going to be, you know, paying very close attention, but it's to the data. And so you're really getting the scientists activated at that point. And because we're spun out from MD Anderson, there's a lot of scientists that are in, you know, on our team, especially on the process development side, where they are really interested in testing things. Okay, what does the data say? What data can we use? And then it becomes a matter of, all right, do we have a project that we can provide value to go to the next step to verify or validate what's, you know, what's really being promised, right? And if we have a project that's ongoing, I mean, we've had some devices that we've looked at and thought, gosh, this would be really great, but we don't have a project accessible to that. Now we're looking, where can we take this? And we may go to some of the faculty at MD Anderson and try to get something going with that. But it really depends upon the right timing, of course, as well. I would say that it's incredibly challenging, as well as the workload. There are sometimes there's ebbs and flows to these things as well. So I would say sometimes it takes a little while to get moving, and other times it just is it can be incredibly fast to work in. But I think you have to kind of meet with all of those aspects of, is there a need? Is there an opportunity to work? Is there an access to a project where that can be done? And because we have, MD Anderson as our academic partner, we're doing projects for them. That's the best fit for us to be able to work with something. People may think, well, working with other academic institutions is a really good opportunity as well. There's not a lot of CTMCs that are spin outs of a place like MD Anderson, but finding willing PIs at academic institutions is probably a really good access point. Stoking the interest there with the team, seeing what can be done, can be a really great opportunity for a really strong publication and some IP sharing potentially if that's the goal. But now you're getting entangled a little bit into the tech transfer and the IP matters, which we'll be covering a little bit later. But anyway, I hope that answers the question.
Definitely. So we discussed, the identifying the right partner, things, about evaluating the right partner, and speaking to timing is everything. So in terms of product development, a lot of people ask about, when is the right time to engage with a partner. Also, part two is what to keep out in-house during that product development, phase, and what, when to look at starting to outsource.
Yeah. So when is the right time? It's when there's a critical driver, usually an investor who is pressing hard for milestones or market launch dates, these types of things. When you need an accelerant to the program is when you get the best bang for the buck out of groups like ours. So we assemble expert teams and large teams quite often, right? Even a moderately complex system will have a dozen experts touching it over some period of time. And these are teams that have been developed over decades and would take decades to build inside your own company. And so they're super productive. Things go very, very fast. And if you're at a stage where you're still kind of doing academic research or early stage proof of concept stuff that's on grant timelines or grant funding, groups like ours, maybe it's not worth spinning us up for that type of things. But when you need product or you need to get to the clinic on a tight schedule, it's a great time to jump in. And then the second part was what was the second part of the question, Ari? Was
in terms of what to keep in-house during product development versus when that tipping point to start looking at outsourcing some of that development.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so often our clients like to keep, and more often than all the time, software and algorithms and that sort of thing, that secret sauce tends to be held close to the clients. We can do all of that work for sure, but just to have the domain knowledge and the expertise around the information is something more and more that our clients like to have. The other thing I would say is that you do want to have product knowledge. So you need a strong leader inside of your company, a technical person or a product person that's there for the whole life cycle of the product and understands where the decisions got made and why. And so that sort of institutional knowledge is something you need to keep close and have within your building.
I guess maybe looking a little bit further down the line, I would add that, for timing, when a proof of concept data set indicates there's a promise of value, and you really need that real world application to make the point, that's a great time to reach out to, a CDMO or something similar, where, we'll be able to put this on a project in parallel, for example, and really compare, do a comparability study, for example. When to keep in-house versus outsourcing, I think is maybe not as relevant, but if I had to provide something to that, I would say, again, that access to real world applications. But testing in a PD environment versus a GMP environment with an experienced team is something you're going to have to go out externally for on that. And I think that's just, from my perspective, where we're adding value is at the tail end, maybe just prior to launch or just as a launch is going on, as far as putting that data package to support that.
And product development firms, contract manufacturers, large manufacturers are always looking at integrating new emerging technologies to just to innovate, right? To be able to be able to use cutting edge technology that's going to solve problems. So, Dan, this question is for you in terms of looking at the perspective of tools companies and how they're always, obviously trying to get their technology, into some of those workflows and partner with whether it's a large manufacturer, CDMO. What are some of the tactics, strategies, and prerequisites to help them be positioned well for that type of engagement or partnership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've hinted a little bit at it before, but when one kind of looks at a corporate structure, you're kind of indexing. Should I go to the C-suite, VPs, directors, technicians? How far down into the trenches should I go? And it may be in order to get a strategic connection, it may be the case where you kind of have to go with a shotgun approach and hit as many as you possibly can. But that really depends on the size of the company that you're targeting. And so if you're at scientific meetings where there's maybe a manufacturer where there's teams that are likely to present, you can discuss, it maybe at a poster or after a discussion, or as you're, networking. It's kind of sort of the unmet needs that are out there, and establish that, it's the old get outside of the building approach to validating your thesis, right? Am I really solving a problem, which you probably will have already, generally established quite well, but get busy and find out who has that problem, and, be prepared with that elevator pitch with the solution, and maybe, convince the technicians and leadership. If you convince technicians, leadership will probably follow. And I found sometimes the other way around is if you convince leadership, the technicians may follow, but they may also provide a roadblock because they're just overworked and have too much stuff going on. It really depends, again, upon sort of the group that you're working with and the size of the company. I would say also at the same time, though, equally important is on the technical side, integration with systems that are pre-existing. If you're looking at CTMC, we're pretty small. We have a headcount in the 80s, but we feed projects into Resilience for launch, and they have hundreds of folks. And what would happen is we started with our ERPs and our small ERPs, but we aligned immediately. We dropped ours and aligned with what Resilience has. And so when we get a device in, we have to see, does it work within that framework? Can we get it to speak to everything, especially if it's analytical, or, which is obviously important to us in a closed system or a GMP environment? Can we get that to work properly? And it hopefully is the case where it's not a huge burden to integrate with that, but fits in with a process that already is existing. Can it take the, material from one side, do the process that it needs to do, and then, continue that on in the context of the overall process that it's involved in, or the analysis system. So there are a lot of details to ferret out and to see that the complexity of these systems is amazing, and they're quite variable. Every manufacturing process has different components to a different analytics. So and the ERPs are unfortunately also another added complexity along with that.
Yeah, and a lot of the manufacturer CDMOs, as we discussed, Dan, before this, they're very conservative of integrating new technologies, and they really want it to be validated, right? And that's one of the biggest goals that tools companies have to get to that point. Is there any advice that anyone could give to get to that point, or different maybe creative options of seeking validation to be able to again be ready to partner with some of the larger strategics?
I would add one thing in, from the perspective at CTMC, we're generally taking something that's maybe done at the bench to bedside, and we're taking in something that may require a lot of process and analytical development to get a process that is really workable. And that's one of the big elements that we're always solving for. So can we make it faster, more robust, and get it ready for the GMP suite? And one of the things that we'll do is, so somebody may come in and say, hey, we're using this device. And well, I mean, that's fine, but why don't we use this one instead? It actually works a lot better, and it'll be faster. So if we now have access to and experience with something that's a novel tool that is, and it really works, we're going to put it on all of the new projects that we have. And what's going to happen is that's going to be driven into resilience, and that's going to be driven into other manufacturing, and that's going to become a process ultimately. That tool is now embedded. It's a long haul, but it's all about getting embedded with the folks that will make sure that tool, and if it really does solve that problem, it's going to be embedded in things down the line. I think that's a really critical path. Again, from kind of the access point for where we're starting, but I'll leave it to the other panelists to kind of answer from their perspectives.
So I guess keep in mind that for these the biologics and the cell therapies, the process is the product. Mm-hmm. And from our perspective, if you're making technology, or if you're inserting technology into processes, it better be faster, cheaper, better. Hopefully all three. And from a person who's been, I was in a gene therapy company before 1990. I'm saying that we are still early in this revolution for cell therapies. So the processes are not efficient. Many of these products are not manufacturable at scale and economically. And so there's a lot of room for innovation. And so if you've got ideas, if you've got technologies that's going to streamline this really important therapeutic area, we're glad to see it and want to push it along.
Yes, and I will add that, I think it's really important that these tools get embedded with the therapy developers as early as possible, right? I think that, the folks, especially in this market, understand that the manufacturability and the cost of their solution is going to be an important driver. So there is, I think, interest even in late-stage R&D or in process development within therapeutic companies to look at instrumentation and understand how it can work. I think one of the nice things about the work that we do at Draper is we have partners with therapeutic companies as well as tool provider. And I think trying to put these things together as part of a collaboration, I think is really important, especially in the cell therapy world where, as Ryan was saying, the process is the product. So having that, hero customer with whom you're maybe engaged with relatively early to make sure that the tool you're developing fits at least that one process, I think can be really key. Not just for that one customer and the first sale, but in driving the understanding and the development that's going to meet mass adoption, so that when the technology is ready for, a CDMO or a place that's interested in sort of leveraging it towards multiple customers, there's already the proof point and understanding about how to leverage it.
Right. And so now we're going to shift over to some of the practical aspects of partnering. And to set the stage, I would like to talk about some of the latest trends in terms of innovation that companies should pay attention to. This could be technology, production, process development. Joe, can you continue on and share more of your insights on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, as has been pointed out, I think the cell and gene therapy world, there's elements of the diagnostics tool world that are changing very, very rapidly as part of the tremendous amount of innovation that's going on in really biology that drives the need for new manufacturing tools, new sensors, new diagnostic tools. Part of what we see as trends there are the need for engineering to integrate with kind of the budding single module solutions that are already out there. And I think that's part of where we've been able to be successful and be helpful in terms of how do you integrate the modules so that even if one part's automated, then you have this manual step, and then you have another part that's automated again. How do you make that seamless? How do you make sure your solution plays nice with the other elements of the workflow that are still dynamic and taking hold as well. So I think the two trends that we see is one around integration and the other one around need for sensors in a lot of the instrumentation. So that's one area we've been able to partner where you have a device, you have a tool, you have a concept that's maybe missing a particular functionality. There's a good chance that within Draper, we may have IP, we may have a prototype, we may have additional technology that can be leveraged to making a combination device that's effective.
Would anybody else like to add any trends that they're seeing in this space?
I mean, Joe nailed it with sensors. I mean, real-time analytics and making adjustments, especially in the cell therapy space. And we're at CTMC largely focused on autologous therapeutics, meaning that we're taking a cell out of one patient, doing some sort of an engineering or modification to that cell and expanding them. So our starting material is as unique as the cancer and as unique as the patient's genetic background. We have no idea what we're going to face when we take those, like say we do an apheresis and we take this out. Is it going to work in the process that's already been established? Is it going to meet the release criteria? I mean, it's a huge challenge. It's so variable. So we try to lock down a process that's as repeatable as it possibly can be. And it is a negotiation with the FDA at the end of the day. But to get there, and this is why a lot of cell therapeutics are so costly, is it's incredibly challenging. The margins are razor thin on them. It's anything that can be done to make that better. And being able to sense what's going on in real time as we're moving through something, or in the case of, we do, again, a lot of tumor infiltrating lymphocytes or TILs. This is where we take a solid tumor, we open up that tumor, and there could be a TIL or a lymphocyte that's waging war against the tumor, this massive tumor, tiny little cell. It's trying to take no prisoners, but it's in the enemy lines. I mean, it's like the best war analogy. So we'll take that little lymphocyte out. We'll train it up, we'll arm it, we'll send it to boot camp essentially, and then expand it into an army and then put it right back in the same patient. Well, the tumor microenvironment is a challenging thing to recapitulate. And so a lot of processes that are, pH, pressure, gases, all these different elements that have to be done, monitoring is so incredibly challenging to get just right and to create that tumor microenvironment as well, in managing that process in real time. I mean, we can have shifts, but how many people are actually going to be watching the system going at one time as those cells are dividing? Hopefully they're dividing on the right timeline. All of those things are so incredibly important. If we can get that right, the margins become much more feasible. It becomes a much more affordable therapeutic. It actually gets out there, and we can cure cancer. It's just how much money can you spend on it, and so we really economically have to address all of those things along the way. And I think sensors, real-time analytics, and then systems that can recapitulate the tumor microenvironment are some of the bigger trends that we've seen of late. And it's really exciting to see what's going on. But oh my gosh, we need a lot of shots on this goal.
Yeah. I'll get highly technical in 3 different areas that we're seeing. So machine learning is being applied across the board. And it's highly successful. I mean, in a sort of a day-to-day or quotidian basis, we use machine learning constantly now for selecting components or modeling systems that we're engineering around. But the back-end data are incredibly valuable, but often incredibly complex. And so machine learning is an amazing revolution that's happening right as we speak. And we've got at Triple Ring, we're staffing up and becoming more and more expert on this every day. It's kind of an easy one to jump into because nobody's an expert, especially around healthcare and med device. The other thing is rapid prototyping, right? Since this is, for the BioTools folks, it's everything is driving towards smaller form factors, injection molded, highly scalable products. And prototyping in that domain is always a challenge, but it's advancing all the time. And then the third one is very particularly, I mean, these complex biochips are integrating more and more chemistry, more and more biology. I mean, you talk about 3D cell culture models, the microphysiological systems. These are really complicated cartridges, and often they need dry rooms. Because we're doing more and more lyophilized chemistry or coatings that need special infrastructure. And there's coming out of COVID, there was a big gap around being able to assemble and manufacture, even at the early stage during R&D, chips in the proper environments. So we've built up clean rooms and dry rooms to handle these complex modern chips.
Nice. And speaking of like rapid prototyping or rapidly making iterations as you're building, a lot of the tools companies in the BioTools cohort are constantly making iterations and capturing customer feedback to improve what their products and technology. And so I think the voice of customer and capturing those pain points and bottlenecks is so valuable to understand as they continue to develop. So I would like to talk about some of those pain points and challenges and bottlenecks, and perhaps some of the technologies that you're looking for to solve some of those problems. As you mentioned, that I don't think we can go through a whole conversation without mentioning AI and ML, but there's a lot of different tools that are being implemented, whether it's on the analytics side or process development. So let's start with some of those big challenges, perhaps in large manufacturers with and some of those pain points and how they're looking to solve those.
Yeah, I think that again, monitoring as we go along the large batch handling aspects of anything from the plasmid through the like lentiviral or to the cell therapeutic product itself. There's a lot of discrete processes that these cells go through, and being able to handle inputs, outputs, and everything along the way in between every single point in the process is really challenging. It's incredibly expensive because of the potential for failures, but going from a PD to a GMP suite is taking a process through that. It can be a radical transformation in times. It looks like it has all the same elements, but the procedures of operating from a PD to GMP is just like worlds apart sometimes. And I think that any elements that take a lot of time or make it challenging to transition there can be a real drawback. And scaling and doing things in parallel when you're in a larger system, those things add up very quickly. And so any ability to streamline and to make that much more hands-off and that, but also user serviceable is important. If you have to pay some large licensing fee in order to program a piece of equipment that you own, that's challenging when you have that, X number of units now. And if something needs to change, then it's X number of units that need to, have that deployed. And if that's something that's handled by, under license or that can be pretty potentially a very expensive process. Now it's a great business model if you're the provider, but it may mean that adoption can be somewhat slowed, or there may be some thoughts about, I don't know, do we really want to integrate this in? And so, those are some of the things that we generally see. I mean, a lot of them are highly specific to projects. So some of them I can't discuss necessarily kind of an open environment, but I'll let the other panels kind of add in, but I may have a couple of other things to chime in.
I mean, I'm glad that Dan went first, because he's where the rubber hits the road in manufacturing for complex biologics, and so that's hard. So what I would add is I think it's a mindset shift is one of the big hurdles, especially for young companies. And as Dan was saying, this product development to GMP transition it's a big one. And you really, as scientists, as engineers, as business leaders, need to change that mindset of your own self, but also of your organization, to create something that is product and productizable, manufacturable. It's a huge leap. And we're not, as innovators, it's something we come to late in life, but it's something that you need to be considering very early. The other thing is that we like to apply sort of engineering rules to these complex biological processes. And so take an engineer's perspective on these process developments. And I'll give you an example. We were working with a very large company that has mesenchymal stem cell therapies, and they had a really amazing process, but they still needed to strip cost out of it. And so we jumped in with our systems engineers, our biologists, and mechies, fluidics handlers, these kinds of folks, right? And broke down their process and quickly came to realize that the largest cost was around quality control and lot release. So potency, purity, sterility. This group was paying thousands, tens of thousands of dollars just to get these things out. They streamlined everything else, and then that was something that was critical to their economics. And then it became, okay, now we've got to find a way to get to those endpoints cheaply, start inventing assays or assay modalities that'll get you there, and then took a big block of cost out of their process. So that's an engineering process that you can apply to a biological set of processes that really does drive value.
And this is a good time to transition to discuss some of the main considerations to keep in mind when going through product development in order to start preparing for small batch manufacturing. Would anybody like to jump in and just kind of discuss like what different things that companies should start thinking about as they start making that transition to production?
It's quick. So for hardware, or chunky bits of physical things, and this is not biological processes. The design team it's usually most effective to have the design team build the first or manufacture the first sets of articles that go into validation. But then once that's proven out and the volumes start to creep up, the economics change. And that's when you start to think about transitioning out of your R&D team and your validation team onto a scaled manufacturer. But you let the economics drive that more than anything. It's a relatively easy set of calculations to make, and you can predict pretty well in time when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I would say too, because CTMC, we deal a lot with the transition between, we're largely focused on proof of concept clinical trial data. So we're playing generally in phase 1 through 2A. And so generally pretty small, we generally have all the data that we need for our partners within about the first 15 subjects. So we're generally living in kind of the small scale realm, but we always have to have the eye on launch and in commercial manufacturing. And so we have to bridge that gap a lot. And I would say, complex systems that require a significant amount of training or maintenance to keep a system operating is going to be difficult. If there's a way to automate something or to make it simple enough, reasonably simple enough for trained technicians to operate. I mean, unfortunately, turnover is a palpable issue for a lot of companies, especially CDMOs and manufacturing facilities. And so being able to quickly train someone and to have that process be as robust and repeatable as possible is important. But I would say specifically to small scale, turnover between manufacturing runs, for example, must be quick, reliable, sterile, cheap. Is probably maybe not as important, but certainly, being able to turn everything over, especially if you're doing something in the virus manufacturing side, and you cannot have cross contamination. So it's got to be something that again is relatively simple. It's as foolproof as possibly can be, but anything that engages easily and quickly and can be done with a high degree of certainty with a minimal amount of training generally tends to be quite valuable.
And I want to talk about some of the challenges that lean startups have from when they're in the pre-seed to Series A range. One that stands out for me is really how to control costs and while they're in the process of building and de-risking. And so, love to get your perspective on how to manage that with your partner, and how to navigate when it goes over budget and you're running into some of those challenges when you're in the deep into that partnership.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can add a little bit to that. I guess one point along these lines I would say is that that's part of the opportunity, I think, in working with an innovation partner, is that when you're early on and you need to pivot, because maybe you need a somewhat different technical approach, it's much tougher to do that when you've hired on a team and you've made them a core part of who you are. So if you're still early, I mean, that's part of the opportunity that we see to help, is we can leverage different technical expertise. And if the final approach or the next approach becomes a different one, it's easy to switch without having to worry about huge cost overruns or really misallocating capital within what is still a small and lean organization. I think to kind of the nuts and bolts of your point in terms of how do we handle budget, in general, when the project itself is relatively uncertain and full of innovation. And I think that comes down to experience and really kind of a shared culture. So we recognize that when working with early stage life science companies, that their funding may be uncertain, that their direction may be uncertain, and part of the service that we provide is actually we run the collaborations to budget, if that's helpful to them, so that there is no chance of overruns that they can't meet or really puts other elements of the company in jeopardy. But I think the flexibility around how you structure those models so that the risk can manage on the sides of both parties is really important, which is why I think you need partners like all the panelists here that live in that world and understand what it takes and how to structure agreements that protects both parties.
Yeah, and very pragmatically, schedule drives everything. So if time equals money, so if you're trying to hold on budget, drive to schedule, and that does a lot of other good things, right? It helps you to meet your milestones when you set them out. But it also is the best thing to control your costs. And then having that experienced technical expert interior to the company, because these are, when you go outsourced, there's a lot of information that gets generated, very, very productive teams, a lot going on. You need someone there right alongside of the development team, seeing what data come out, seeing what decisions have to be made, make quick decisions. Don't hesitate to say, hang on just a second, I need a week to assimilate all this stuff, and then we're going to set a new direction. Those are just some basic tactics for helping to control your costs.
Yeah, and alignment with that partner, as Ryan, I think, it said many minutes ago, is so important, and it's worth coming back to, because if you're working with a company that's like let's say a CDMO, and they're very used to a quid pro quo relationship where if I give you money, you give me data. Is this the data that I want? Probably not. Give me more money, I'll give you more data. Is that data now what I want? No. Okay, more money. So this thing keeps going and going and going, and every time the amounts may seem small, but they grow very large inadvertently oftentimes. And this can happen with the wrong sort of a partner. So you really want that alignment of interest where it's like, look, if we get the data, then we both win. And so now there's a vested self-interest on both parties, mutually generate or drive the data that is really needed. And is the project developed to provide that data? Are there pivots that are done at the right time in the right way? So cost overruns ought to be a shared risk. And I think that grants from, as Joe has been talking about, revenue sharing, where Ryan and I kind of live as well. These are possible to offset project-based costs, but you have to have that enlightened self-interest, but also the mutual interest of the project overall to live well in that. So those are incredibly critical.
Nice. And we're gonna, before we wrap up into the cohort only Q&A, I just want to ask one final kind of rapid fire question to the panelists, and you can answer this in various ways. So basically, I want to know either some of the common mistakes that you see early stage companies make, or you talk about maybe one thing that really stood out from this conversation, one key takeaway to take home and ponder. So feel free to jump in.
Sure, I'll start. Avoid making perfect the enemy of good enough. Back to this schedule thing. If you drive to schedule, that doesn't allow features to creep in, for example. Everybody, and then this kind of thing. So realize where you are in the process. You're trying to validate an idea. You're not trying to make the perfect thing right away. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I would say not pivoting quickly enough, which very much relates.
Yeah, those are both great. And I'll add that, I think just being very singularly focused on your North Star, what is your hero customer? What is the bare minimum of features that the thing has to do so that it can get to the next phase and ultimately be used in the real world? I think that is the superpower of an early stage company, is that it can have that kind of focus versus a large organization that's being pulled in, inevitably in multiple directions. And I think leveraging that superpower and that clear focus can lead to great success.
Love it. Well, thank you, Ryan and Dan and Joe. Really appreciate, all of those valuable insights. Thank you for everyone joining us on LinkedIn live stream and YouTube. We're now gonna close it off and do the BioTools Innovator Cohort Q&A. So